Literally. So I'm in a proper studio because I was like, this has to be qualities. So yeah, no. So I think we'll just get started. How are you?
No, I'm good. I'm good. I'm okay. But South African weather is starting to feel like more and more like I think English weather. It's been in Joburg.
Uh-huh.
It's just been raining like nonstop. Overcast. So
I'm
yeah,
I'm
yeah.
I'm so glad you started the weather conversation because it was one of the questions I was going to ask. Then I thought, you know what, it's gonna make me sound so European, like
No,
you.
no.
Because the weather here, Kaya, like I would do anything to be in Southern Africa to be in the warmth. So
Yeah, when the weather is like this, it's
yeah.
still way better, I think, than English weather.
It's absolutely better. But okay, let me introduce you, right? I am I am so excited. I don't know if you can tell. Like I'm trying to keep it together. I'm trying to keep it together. Okay, let me just introduce you. Hello, guys. If you're listening or watching, you're listening to Chat with Nat with me, Natasha. And today we've got a really special guest. Like, I know I say this a lot of times, but this time, this is not a drill. It's for real, right? We have got Mr. Khaya Dlanga, who is an author, not just any author, a best-selling author. Best-selling author of to quote myself, and many other books. And he's recently published his new book, which is Life is Like That Sometimes. Kai is also a marketer and a commentator. Is there anything I've left out, Kaya? What do you
Well,
not
I think
do?
for me, it's like, how did you get a copy?
It's on Amazon. I ordered it on
Oh, Santa
Amazon.
Maria.
Yeah.
Why do people, like, okay, thank goodness, because I had a lot of people ask me, said that, oh, it's not on Amazon. So I was like, what do you mean it's not on Amazon? Okay,
No,
good.
it's on. So I
Yeah.
ordered this on, I want to say Tuesday last week, and I got it on
Yes.
Friday. So I don't
Oh,
know.
that okay. That's
I don't know if it's just recently come on Amazon, but I ordered
I
it
think
from.
it's recently come on.
Yeah, I ordered it on Amazon. So yes, guys, make sure you get your copy. I was pleasantly surprised to see that it was on there because I thought it was going to be one of those things where you're like, is it on there or is it not on there? So
Yeah,
well done
yeah.
to your publishers.
Thank you. I'll let them know because I've been harassing them, like because it was not on for about a week.
Ah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. Okay. So I think maybe we'll start with this theme actually, because one of the things that you mentioned in your book, right, is just about um I guess the disparity in terms of access to books, right? And you talk about how in South Africa in particular, like Black South Africans don't really have the same access to books as white South Africans for a number of reasons, right? Most of it's socioeconomic and white people probably are the ones who have discretionary income to buy books. And then I'm sure there's politics with the publishing. And so I've been watching your stories. I stalk you. I'm a stalker on your socials. And I've seen you've had book launches and people are reading your book. How, how do you think this is shifting? Like what's your sense maybe with this book, and maybe not other books as well by Black authors in South Africa? Do you think that there's a shift and like more Black people are accessing books or?
Yeah, I certainly think that more Black people are accessing books,
Mm,
but I don't think that it is at the pace I think that I would like for
yeah.
people to access books. And I think some of the challenges that we have is that maybe because again of our history as a country is that maybe not many people have a culture of reading, for leisure.
Mm,
And so it really does become quite a challenge to get more people into that space. And particularly when we have so many other options of being educated and entertained.
yeah.
So we've got like TikTok, we've got podcasts, we've
Yeah.
got so many other avenues that people can, find access to information. And I think that books do offer a different form of, um, in my view, I think that it's a deeper learning, I guess,
Yeah.
or um, a deeper access to information and more
Yeah.
intimate, because you're holding the book, you're touching it.
Yeah.
And yes, I do know that there are things like Kindle and all sorts of things, but even that is, for some, people find it expensive, to buy
Mm.
a Kindle and then to download a book, and then you
Yeah.
don't really own that book, really.
Yeah. Yeah.
Unlike owning a physical copy, because
Yeah.
it's the same issue, I suppose, that we have when it comes to music. I remember, I'm come from an era where you could buy a DVD, I mean a
Mhm.
CD, and it
Mhm.
was yours. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? And if I didn't pay my subscription, it didn't mean that I didn't have access,
Yeah.
to my I had my, because it was mine. If I was broke, the
Yeah.
DVD was so, because
Yeah.
I think that today, if you don't have access to I imagine if you don't pay your Apple, even if you buy a movie, I don't know if you can watch the movie if you haven't paid a subscription.
Yeah.
Um, so I just think that maybe there needs to be a different model,
Mm.
in order for people to be able to access books. Because I mean, I think I look at my book and it's like, yes, this price is a little bit steep.
Mm.
Um, when I think about the country,
Mm.
and my book, funny enough, to quote myself, my first memoir, that one, um, there was an article that came out in the Sunday Times when it came out, was
Mhm.
that it was the most stolen book when it came out.
Oh, really?
And
Yeah.
and then there were other titles that were stolen.
Yeah.
But the reason this book was stolen like it was
Mm.
because I thought people were like saying, "Oh, there's a story they can relate to,"
Yeah.
um, but they can't afford the books.
Yeah.
So it was like a double-edged sword. On the one hand, it's complimentary, but then on the other hand, it's like, well, I'm not getting anything out of it.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, I can definitely see that. I think it's an issue across the African literacy scene. And I think it's interesting because your writing style, right? Because if we go back to culture and tradition, like a lot of our history and stories, right, were passed down through oral tradition, right? And I think your style of writing, it you can sort of imagine, people gathered around the fireplace listening to those stories, right? And I think that's part of the intrigue of that, because it's it seems accessible, right? It seems like you're talking to your cousin or your older cousin, who lived to see their great grandfather and stuff like that. So I like the way that you've used your writing to kind of, I guess, keep the spirit of oral tradition, right? Because like one of the stories that I've enjoyed is about your grandfather, the wife beater trial. So because I think that's such a powerful story, right? Because it's very like King Solomon esque, right? Is it King Solomon who said, cut the baby in half?
Yes, yes, it's King Solomon. Yeah, yeah.
It's very wise in that way. So talk to me about why you felt it's important to kind of, I guess, chronicle your family story, or your grandfather, or that particular story. Yeah.
Um, I remember I was invited many years ago, before I'd even written any book,
Yeah.
by to a roundtable discussion where there were maybe, I don't know, maybe 15 of us with
Hmm.
President Mbeki, former South African president.
Yeah.
And he had, recently been recalled, as
Hmm.
they call it.
Hmm.
So he had recently
Yeah.
been asked by the ANC to say,
Yes.
dude, we don't want you to be president anymore. We
Yeah.
want someone. And so I was part of this round table, and he was having a whole discussion. And one thing that stuck out in that conversation as well was when he said, as Africans, we
Mm,
actually don't tell our stories.
mm.
It's other people who we have relinquished um, that gift, that where other people tell our stories about us,
Yeah,
and then which means we only get to see ourselves through the image of other people
yeah,
or through the lens of someone else rather than from our own perspective
yeah.
and that we know. And that I found that very powerful. And I also feel that every story is worth telling.
Hmm.
And I suppose it's only a matter of how you tell the story, right? Because this is how we get to document who we are and how people lived at a certain point in time.
Yeah.
And for me, I feel that the documentation or the stories that I write about are, yes, even though I don't explicitly talk about and say, this is what was happening if you were a child,
Mm,
growing up in apartheid,
mm.
and not being aware that there's a thing called apartheid, and then growing up in the transition, of that apartheid, what that was like,
Yeah,
for a black child coming from my kind of uh, section of the world,
yeah.
you know, going to schools with white people. Like, what is that
Mm,
like? Being the
mm.
first kid, in the to go to school with white kids. So these are the kinds of stories that I think are quite important, that they must be told from our perspective
Yeah,
rather than um, I am retelling my life maybe to a white writer who
yeah,
then has their own lens and view of my world.
yeah.
And another thing that someone once said to me, again, this is long before I started writing. I wish I could remember the name of this lady. I was invited to the Franschhoek Literary Festival,
Hmm.
and I went there, and we were on our way to the festival. It's a white woman, and she said to me, "It's time that this the stories about Nelson Mandela were written by Black people."
Mm,
And she said at the time, I think this was maybe 2012, I don't remember, she said not one
mm.
book at that stage about Nelson Mandela had been written by a Black person.
Wow.
All books about Nelson Mandela were written
Yeah,
by white people,
wow.
which meant that it was like we were seeing him from not on our own lens, because I think that there's some contextual matters that I imagine if a Black writer went to write about his life,
Yeah,
his biography would go into the village and would have like an instinctive understanding of certain parts of his life
yeah,
that are important. Then if you don't understand uh, maybe Xhosa culture or
yeah,
African culture, you might think some of those things are insignificant, but they're quite important.
yeah.
So, um, and I was like, wow, this is striking. So even if I am not technically the greatest writer in the world, and I think that what is important is that if more of us start writing stories about ourselves
Mm,
and it tells things, it's going to, because if people can see that, like, okay, a Black writer can sell, I have a story that I want to it encourages other people to share our stories so that they don't disappear into the ether.
yeah.
Because when we don't tell our stories, we die.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I like the way you tell the stories because it paints a picture. Like I can almost imagine, Transkei and the green and playing in the field. And when you speak about the tale of the 2 yards, right? You have your homestead, which is like booming with people, and then you have got that lone place, right? With that lady. And I can almost visualize it, right? Because I grew up in, well, we call them plots. I don't know in South Africa if you call them plots as well, like which are they're not farms, but they're like small
Yes,
farms, right? In
yes,
Bulawayo in
yes,
Zimbabwe. So I can picture that because you always had there was a sort of there were different stories that different homes told, right? And you've got that woman who had such devastating loss, but I guess at that young age, it didn't it probably didn't register, but it stayed with you for a long time that you
yes.
told the story. So maybe if we can speak about that, like when you reflect on that, the tale of 2 yards, like are you more empathetic with that lady who, had outlived all her children and was seemingly on her own, and what was at the mercy of the kindness of people like your grandmother, your family, sending things over to them.
Um, I just realized that I did not fully answer your first question,
Oh,
but I'll come
sorry.
back to. So no, no, I'll come. And I'm sorry, it just occurred
Yeah.
to me when you said like the way
Mm,
I suppose part of the way I tell the stories is because maybe it is part of the oral tradition that I grew up under,
yeah.
where my mother would tell stories, my grandparents would tell stories. When I was with my cousins, they tell stories,
Mm.
and because we didn't have television when I was growing up, in rural Eastern Cape, all we had were other people telling stories
Yeah.
or listening to stories on the radio.
Yeah.
Um, but then the elderly woman that you're speaking about is at the time she just scared. I mean, I was just scared of her. I was terrified. I thought like,
Mm.
okay, she's this old woman who is, you know, she's kind of she always walked with her hands behind her back, kind of,
Yeah.
you know how they walk,
Yeah.
those elderly
Yeah.
women. And I mean, you grow up as a child and people say that just other kids, oh my God, that woman is
Mm.
a witch. So you kind of have a little trepidation around
Yeah.
her,
Yeah.
you see her because you think, and every time my grandmother used to send me to her house to help out to give things to her, I
Yeah.
couldn't wait to sprint out and run out of the yard.
Yeah.
But but I think that the sympathy that you speak about,
Mm.
the empathy, is it only comes out later in
Mm.
my life when I only look back to really understand what was happening
Yeah.
to her, was that
Mm.
she had nobody. It
Yeah.
was just her.
Yeah.
But as a child, you don't know that. And
Yeah.
you don't know what it means to be alone because you're never alone as a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
Or well, at least I mean it's no the possibility
Mm.
of being alone and loneliness when I think about where I grew up and how I grew up was not a concept to me at all.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
couldn't understand it. And so it was very foreign seeing this woman who just lived by herself when
Mm.
every other family that around me was bustling with people except
Yeah.
for her.
Yeah.
And when I talk, I mean, I the idea of saying that when I was, we used to joke as children,
Mm.
the idea of someone saying, give him my space, like it did not exist because
Mm.
there was no space to go to, and there was no, I'll go to my room. Well, there was no room, your
Yeah.
room. And I'm
Yeah.
saying you didn't have a room.
Yeah.
You shared with your cousins, there was always someone around.
Yeah.
And there was no such thing as mine. In fact, like if kids are playing together and then you get called out somewhere by a grandparent or someone and you have to go,
Yeah.
and I was sitting in a specific spot,
Yeah.
and then I come back and maybe my cousin or my sister has taken my spot, and I say, no, get out of my spot, get out of my
Mm.
place.
Mm.
And then what we would say was like, no, 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 your place is in heaven. You don't have a place. So, and then you're like, okay, oh, your space is in heaven. It is not
Yeah.
here.
Yeah.
So there was no sense of like, I think, loneliness. So
Mm.
that's what I'm saying. As a child growing
Mm.
up, I couldn't understand that. I probably only really understood what that woman was going through when I was in my 20s, and then understanding
Yeah.
things like isolation and loneliness and all of
Yeah.
that. But
Yeah.
before that, it was never anything I thought about.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, no. I can definitely see that. It's like to be a child, right? It's like you didn't realize that those were probably the best days, like when you had no bills,
Exactly.
you're
Yeah.
carefree. Talking about being carefree, but out of from the chapters of this book, right? So the stories that you told, which one was the lightest to write?
It's okay. That's a very good question. But there was one that
Hmm.
is I found so silly
Uh huh.
and so stupid, uh, but I had so much fun writing. Was the bet that God had with the devil about Job.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And but because I write my own version, of yes, it's still follow the same story,
Yeah.
but the way I tell it is really I think it's fun, it's silly, um, and yeah, so I had a lot of fun actually writing that. I even remember I was like, oh my god, this is so dumb. I don't even know why I'm writing this, but
with with
but I was having
without spoiling it too much, like, can you give us a flavor of your version of events of in the book of Kaya, chapter 2?
so so I think I write things like so God was like something about like um Job was or the devil says, hey, like
Mhm.
the only reason this guy likes you is because you give him all this stuff. He's the richest guy in the world. He's got a family, happy family. Everybody loves him. He's faced no hardships at all. Like you
Mm.
are acting like you are his personal ATM. I use kind of words like that.
Yeah.
Um, and then I talk about how when he first hears that like he's lost all his cattle, and I'm like, it's like while Job was looking at his stock portfolio rising, one of his servants comes up and tells him and says, "This just happened," and
Yeah.
he's like, So it's like it's quite silly. It's really silly that I've written it, but
Yeah.
the message remains the same.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. When you explain it like that, have you seen that meme of well, it's not funny. Like, the moment I visualized, I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have said this. But you know that when George Bush is in the school and someone whispers to him,
Yes, yes, yes,
that's what I'm
yes,
imagining when someone's like, "Ooh, the S&P
yes. That's
500
funny.
is down." Like,
Yes, they were sitting or after the 9/11 and just
yeah,
sitting there.
yeah, yeah, in the
Yeah,
school, and he
yeah.
gets that. Okay, so I'll take a quick detour, right? Because I've got you here, and I was like, what? I have to talk about politics with Kaya because I, I know you've been I've been watching, I've been seeing your tweets. Well, I refuse to call it post X or whatever.
I know it's so hard to
Yeah,
say that.
yeah.
I can't as well.
I know, but yeah. So the whole Trump thing. So, as a South African, can you explain to us what's happening with your South African brother, Elon Musk?
We don't know that guy. Please don't go. He's Canadian American. It's not South African. That he is, like I think that a part of it with
Mm,
Elon is he kind of equates the success in business with the possibility and the ideas that it means that he'll be equally effective when it comes to running government and all of that. So as
yeah,
the richest guy in the world, I should be able to I know better than most people. And I think
yeah,
that people don't and he found a gullible
yeah,
guy who
mm,
admires wealthy people. I think to
yeah,
him the only thing that matters is like, well, if someone else is rich, then that person is to him is worth listening to.
yeah,
Um, and and I also think with Elon
mm,
is that I think he's also used to getting his own way.
yeah, yeah,
And if you kind of say no, he's gonna find a way to make that, you know. And then when I look at what he's doing, with South Africa, I think that
yeah,
we are just like for example, like when the South African ambassador was
mm,
expelled, like now, just recently, like a few days ago from
mhm,
the US.
mhm,
The stock market hasn't even. When I look at like
yeah,
the rand, if anything, has improved. You know
yeah,
what I'm saying? So, like
yeah,
previously, something that America says, something was South Africa, and then the world would shake. And I almost feel that now the world, while people kind of maybe take the things that he says seriously, but they
mm,
also think that they can't take them seriously.
yeah, yeah,
There are some big because he has this tendency of He'll make a threat and then he'll go back on his word and and but he will try and make it look like he's a tough guy. You know, like
Yeah.
like the terrorists
Yeah.
against Mexico and Canada, and
Yeah.
then last minute he kind of, yeah, but he'll act like, yeah, he's a tough guy. He won when
Yeah.
there was nothing to win in the first place.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
the problem I think with that is that
Mm.
now the feeling that maybe Europe had and the rest of the world, like, we can always depend on America. It's like, you know what, the world, we can't depend on this country.
Yeah.
And so what's happening is that now, well, Europe now is developing even closer ties, for example, with China,
Yeah.
something that, like, the US didn't want. And
Yeah.
and he is and the world is trying to prepare for a world where it depends on each other,
Mm.
except for the states,
Yeah.
because if you can let a madman run the most powerful country in the world,
Yeah.
um, I mean,
Yeah.
what does that mean for the rest of global security? I
Yeah.
think, if you will. What I don't know if this is, I mean, if this is good or bad, I don't
Mm.
know what's going to happen in the future.
Mm.
But it's certainly good for certain countries,
Yeah.
and for some, maybe not so good. But I think that the world is going to be very different when Trump goes, and America won't have as strong as a great of a stronghold as it once did.
Yeah.
And that is a probably a mistake for America, but maybe
Mm.
good for the rest of
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think what we're seeing is a more we're seeing countries become more nationalistic in their view, right? And becoming more about just them. Just on the South Africa point, the whole Afriforum thing, I saw that Cyril Ramaphosa came out quite strong, saying that he has a dim view. I mean, and I saw your TikTok just on it because um, yeah, I mean, what's your take? Because obviously they've been offered, like, okay, if you are being persecuted, you know, you can come this way. But then I saw I forget who it is from Afriforum who was like, well, no, we need to hold ANC accountable and all the comments. I think Julius Malem was there, and everyone is just like, go. And I'm like, oh, they've put themselves in a corner, right? Because
exactly.
now everyone is just like,
Yeah,
okay, go.
yeah, because it's because they're like, okay, they've been persecuted,
Yeah,
that white farmers are being killed. There's
yeah,
all this false statements that their land is being seized.
yeah,
So when Donald Trump said, okay, signing an executive order where white Afrikaners will have political uh, refugee status in
yeah,
America. And the
yeah,
problem is that once you accept political asylum, is that mean you can't go back to your country once you go to the States,
yeah.
because while you're being why would you go back to where you're being persecuted?
Exactly,
And
exactly.
then they had a press conference,
Mm,
because now they're panicking
mm,
because um I mean, one of the guys, they're talking about, well, if they go to the States, they won't be able to exercise their language. They won't speak Afrikaans. Okay, number one. Number two, and there were just so many, and
yeah,
then these Africans, these Afriforum guys, suddenly said, yes, but there is no mass murder of white people in South Africa. Farms aren't being seized.
yeah,
And I was like, like, why go about this massive disinformation phase?
yeah.
And then, but also, I think what was worrying them was
Mm,
that sanctions, South Africa might be sanctioned because Trump is unpredictable. So
yeah,
they're worried about sanctions. And if those sanctions do take place, that they will be affected directly.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
their pockets will be affected. So all now they're like, guys, maybe there aren't terrible things really happening in South Africa.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
think that, and I do feel that I keep hearing people talk about Gary Player,
Mm,
and I wonder how much what he is saying to Donald Trump, because
mm,
Donald Trump loves golfers, absolutely
yeah,
loves golfers.
yeah,
So, and I imagine he's got a huge respect and admiration for Gary Player.
yeah,
And it'd be interesting what kind of things that he's been saying to him too.
Yeah.
that have also led to this kind of. But Trump has got a lot of South Africans actually around him, like a
Yeah.
lot of South Africans,
Yeah.
and I think that's why we're having the issues that we're having,
Mm,
and it is. I think it's white South Africans who grew up around apartheid South Africa
mm.
and who find it a problem with equality, but they don't think that they have a problem with equality.
Mm, mm. No, well said, well said. And talking about farming, I would be remiss not to get your take on this, being Zimbabwean myself. And I guess what I said before about countries becoming more nationalistic and inward facing, I kind of get the sense that South Africa is the same because of the real pressures that South Africa sort of is experiencing in terms of the economy and public services. And we see a lot of xenophobic attacks sometimes, and this feeling where like Zimbabweans are like person non grata and everything. And I know you mentioned like President Thabo Mbeki at the top, and I know he sort of like played a role. I guess his
White
history.
diplomacy.
Yes, quiet diplomacy. Yes, so I kind of wanted to kind of get your take because I think obviously, yeah. Just your take on, I guess, South Africa's role, if there's any, or are we just? Is it just now each man for himself? And yeah,
I think that it's unsustainable for like for complete nationalism. I think,
yeah,
around the world, it's completely unsustainable.
yeah,
There's such massive inter and codependencies systems all around the world. I produce this metal that like so many. I mean, there's some metals that are required that are only available. Like we produce, maybe South Africa produces about
yeah,
70 or 80%, of the market of that particular metal in the world. And if, for example, if I think about platinum reserves, I
mm,
think South Africa controls 70%.
mm,
And platinum is used for virtually, if you think of any car, of any phone or anything, it's required.
yeah,
So we need that commerce,
mm,
for trading with those other countries.
mm,
But when it comes to I think that I don't think that South Africa is becoming nationalistic.
yeah,
I think that what is happening are people who don't know where to focus their frustrations of
mm,
unemployment and
mm,
lack of service delivery. So someone is going to find the next closest victim
yeah,
to blame,
yeah,
and maybe this person they think is easiest to target.
yeah,
And and in my view,
mm,
I I don't think that they have been as it's also been quite interesting, just like the lies about farm murders
mm,
and about these massive xenophobic attacks that people
yeah,
seem to do. Yes, I think you kind of have flare-ups that have
yeah,
happened,
yeah,
here and there, but they certainly have not been as wide as widely reported. I mean,
mm,
I remember in 2014, I think
mm,
there was like a flare up, like in Durban, some
mm,
xenophobic attacks, and I
yeah,
literally I got like a whole bunch of. I was frustrated. I was like, I don't know, complain about xenophobia on
yeah,
social media. I'm actually done. I think something needs to be done.
yeah,
And I organized a bus. I said,
mhm,
anybody wants to go, let's
yeah,
go to Durban from
yeah,
Joburg.
yeah,
Organized a bus. I think it was in 12 hours.
yeah,
Got the bus was full of people who
yeah,
went to Durban to join a march where we protested against these xenophobic attacks.
yeah,
And there were, I mean, thousands and thousands of people who were
mm,
marching against, xenophobia.
yeah,
So I I think that the the sentiment
mm,
is not as massive
yeah,
as it's been reported.
Right.
But I think when you're directly affected by it, and I'm the person who's been attacked, I'm not a number. I am
Yeah.
personally affected. My
Yeah.
property is affected. My life has been affected.
Yeah.
So I can understand why as somebody would feel some type of way about it. But
Yeah.
I don't get the sense of South Africans being as xenophobic as people say that they are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that the frustration of some people
Mm.
can come across, I think, as that.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I think when I've worked, I've got many colleagues,
Mm.
who've come from other countries,
Yeah.
from the rest of the continent.
Mm.
Yeah, people who own shops,
Mm.
um, people who do so much. I think in this country, people who,
Yeah.
some people have helpers, some people electrician,
Yeah.
but no one is saying like, well, I don't want this person to do work for me because they are from another country. I
Yeah.
just I've never heard anybody say that.
Yeah.
But of course, you will always have opportunistic criminal elements
Yeah.
who are going to use that frustration because they really just want to commit crime. If
Yeah.
I think about the um, when the when again in KZN,
Mm.
when Jacob Zuma was there were these riots in KZN because Jacob
Mm.
Zuma was found guilty of something.
Yeah.
And again, there were
Mm.
people who were like genuinely upset that happened,
Yeah.
but then you also had a massive criminal element that was a
Yeah.
perfect opportunity to go looting. And that's what it
Yeah.
became,
Yeah.
burning,
Yeah.
malls and doing all sorts of things,
Yeah.
because for them it was a chance to get free stuff.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I, I do think that yes,
Mm.
there's a social political issue that is happening there at the same time,
Yeah.
but also we should not just blanket, because in KZN someone could simply say that
Mm.
there's people in KZN in KwaZulu-Natal are unruly,
Yeah.
but it's a small element that
Yeah.
can cause massive damage,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and those repercussions of those riots are actually being felt, to this day
Yeah.
by many other communities. And
Mm.
I think exactly the same when these xenophobic attacks, do take place.
Yeah. 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 Okay. So Kai, quick question. Life is like that sometimes. Was that an actual text message?
No.
No? You hesitated there.
I wanted to lie and say yes, it wasn't.
Cause I
No,
was
no, no, that was just a title. But the story, like the picture itself,
yeah.
is that was actually at a club in
R-
Cape Town called Coco.
really? So
So
what was
what was
happening at
happening at
Coco?
Coco? Ah, actually, it was the after party of a thing called the Queen's Plate, which is now obviously because there's a king, it's a King's Plate. So it happened first, it's usually the first Saturday of January of every year. So I was at the after party of that.
Ah, interesting. But is it anything special about this picture that you were like, you know what? I like this picture.
Sure. Well, I think that because it's life, the title of the book is Life is Like That Sometimes. I
Yeah.
thought like, this kind of like playful, not playful, but kind of cheeky look kind of is nice because the, yeah, I just thought that it's a nice image, for the book.
Yeah. Okay, cool. You know what? Because I know I don't have too much more of your time. There is something that I really wanted to talk about is I guess just asking about your relationship with your sisters, right? And okay. So the reason I'm bringing this up is because in the book, right, particularly your sister Usigi, right, um, there was a theme when I was reading it, right, that really touched me, because at when your mother passed away and when your brother passed away, she was there and always, you know, part of the party conveying the message to you, right?
Yeah.
And I just wondered what I guess what that has done to your relationship. And I can only imagine how difficult it is, right? To be the one to share news with someone. And to sort of do it not once, but twice. So I was really interested in that and your perspective of that. Yeah.
I mean, I- it's 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 funny because she was there, right? Because I think traditionally she can't deliver the news to me,
Yeah.
right? So, which is why then it was my aunt, which was my mom's sister, who they were there together, and then she called me when my brother passed away. So I spoke to my aunt,
Yeah.
and then when my mom passed away, she sent me a text because I mean I could my phone is always on silent,
Yeah.
and I was busy with something else, and then I picked up my phone. I
Mm,
saw these missed calls,
mm,
WhatsApp missed calls, and then went to messages, and then I saw, oh, my aunt is trying to call me, and
mm.
then I called her back. But I think for her, I, I, it's obviously a difficult thing that we really haven't talked about. Like I
Okay.
don't think there's a weird thing that happens. I think in families, I imagine when
Mm.
someone you love is close to you goes away and they pass away,
Yeah.
there is an avoidance, I suppose, of talking about those moments. And
Yeah.
I think because I think part of it is like you don't want to see or hear the pain of the
Yeah.
other person as they say to you. So, of course, you can only imagine it. So you'd rather talk about everything else but that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And whether that is healthy or not, I don't know. And maybe over time we will
Mm.
be to kind of talk about it and and see what happens, but we just don't.
Yeah, yeah, and the reason I picked up on that particularly is because I I sort of have a similar experience in terms of sharing grief with a particular person in my family. My aunt who's been there at those points and been the person to say, your mom's passed away or this, and I've had to do it once to someone to tell them, and just the heaviness that comes with, like, I think it stays with you for a very very long time, but in a way it makes you close because there's a low that you've shared that no one else can understand. And one of the things that I enjoyed with when you're talking about, maybe enjoyed is not the right word, but I enjoyed it because you gave language to something that I've been unable to explain. As someone I've lost my parents as well. When you said you felt untethered, right? Um, After the loss of your mother, and you felt like untethered, and you felt for the first time you are alone. You know, and I read that and I said, yes, this is exactly what I've been trying to describe to people, that there's it's not hopelessness, but like you're like, I'm a free agent, right? And I think Chimamanda also speaks about this when she talks about when I think her father, I don't know which, but she lost both her parents. And she like there was a feeling of I almost don't have to impress anyone. I like I almost don't care. And I just wondered if you still feel that way, or if you've evolved from that feeling.
Like, I mean, you still feel I don't know if I've evolved from it or I'm just used to it now or getting used to it. That feeling of being it's like I think, okay, I'm here now. I'm in this experience, and there's nothing I can do about it except to go on living. And I suppose you kind of have to set up now your because I think that these imaginary expectations that you have when your parents are still around, that you want to, even if they don't have them for you, but you
Yeah.
a part of you feels like they do have them, they just don't express them.
Yeah.
Or you try to live up to those expectations.
Yeah.
And then now when there is no one there, your mother and your father are not there anymore, then it's almost as if you have to find new expectations for yourself.
Yeah.
And because you think the expectations or the things that you're doing because you wanted to and for yourself,
Yeah.
but then they don't have that as much meaning anymore, nor as much
Yeah.
weight when those people aren't there. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's due to the fact that, like, well, I don't have any kids, so
Mm.
I can't transfer that, onto like the kids that I might have. I don't
Yeah.
have a wife. So I feel that that space is something that like suddenly you have to build now for yourself and be like, okay,
Yeah.
the only expectations that are there are the ones that I have to create myself. But also like expectations are, I suppose, also a dangerous thing because they can be unrealistic, but at the
Yeah.
same time, who wants to do realistic things? Because
Yeah.
uh, then if you try to aim for what is realistic, then what kind of life are you really trying to live? If you're like, okay, well, I think anyone who's kind of achieved anything in life has to have a level of like
Yeah.
lack of exceed, I think,
Yeah.
what seems real at the time.
Yeah.
Um, because I think that like reality is, when people say that you have to live in reality, I almost find that like an insult
Mm.
because in order to achieve anything, I think in the world, you have to kind of live beyond. You have to look beyond what is realistic because reality is a prison.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's unrealistic to want to write a book and then to write it and then it's out there and it's published.
Yeah.
But you keep having to aim for the unrealistic. Everything that is, I'm sure that you're doing now, there was a point where that thing was unrealistic, but because
Yeah.
you've achieved it, now you kind of like, oh, okay, it happened. But then no, at some point you've got to appreciate the fact
Yeah.
that it was but a dream at some
Yeah.
point, and then to look at it with like this disdain or an expectation that it was supposed to happen. No, it wasn't supposed to happen because at some point you never thought it was going to happen.
Yeah.
Um, so I don't know what I'm saying, but yeah.
No, no, no. Thank you. I just really want to say thank you so much for the book. And I think the way you talk about um hello? Oh, okay. No, I just really want to say thank you so much for your vulnerability in the book, right? Um and the conversations that you've had before, like even on Trevor's podcast. And and thank you really just because from a selfish point of view, because I was able to cry. Because sometimes you just need that outlet to cry. So thank you so much for that vulnerability. And I didn't want to dwell too much on that because I know that's probably something that you keep talking about, and sometimes it can reopen wounds. So thank you so much for indulging me. And I guess I wanted to say in closing, sort of, I wanted to ask, have you been reading the reviews of your book? comments of your books, or do you just not pay attention?
I usually wait a while.
Yeah.
And maybe like I'll wait maybe 2 months and then I'll start saying, okay, what are people saying?
Yeah.
But now it's, I just wait a little. And I suppose the most important review for me was like for my sisters, because I just wanted to know, I just wanted them to feel that I was, I did all our grief, even though I was speaking about mine specifically, I did justice and that's not unfair to anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And actually, you teased this properly, because I saw the comment that so the caption that your sister put on Instagram, and I wanted to read it because I thought it just captured it so well. So forgive me, my Zimbabwean Ndebele accent is going to come out. Like the TikTok challenge where people are like talking and then the accent comes out. So forgive me if it does, but I wanted to read this. So your sister says, son of Zandisile Tobile Dlanga, son of Tambile Paulos Dlanga, son of Dlavumane, son of Mbongo. Congratulations, Madiba, Dlomo, Sopicho, Yem, Dibindonga, Khaya, on your fourth book. Talk about redeeming your father's brief life and grandfather's legacy. We look forward to the Wednesday book launch, and may it be blessed. May it inspire a new generation of storytellers. May it validate and give courage to make visible the people who have been made to feel invisible for so long. To quote our mother, Nxa ekubonga, Madiba omfichane omdenge zenzo.
Zenzo.
Yes.
I love that so much.
Yeah, no, thank you. No, I thought it was beautiful. It was beautiful.
It was
That it was like it was a relief, to see that she felt that I did everything justice. So and then I was like, any review that comes, like whatever.
Yeah. That was the most important review. And Khaya, thank you so much. I've had you on for much longer than we had planned. Thank you for bearing with some of the technical issues that we've had. And guys, make sure you get this. Life is like that sometimes. And no, this is like the highlight of the first quarter of the year for me.
Thank you so much. No, thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And take care of yourself. And we appreciate you. Absolutely. Keep telling those stories. Keep telling our stories. We really appreciate you.
Thanks, Nat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.